We're live. Yes, very, very good. We are running a little bit behind this morning, but happy go live, everybody. I am Aileen Day, and it is Sunday for us down here in the Southern Hemisphere. And normally we would have gone live about 15 minutes ago, but I have been doing a few extra bits and pieces. So apologies for the tardiness. But we are here now. So if this is the first time you've joined us, then welcome. And if you don't know who you clicked on, I'm Aileen Day, and I'm the owner of Meraki Business Solutions and Value Driven Brand. So today, what we are going to be having a bit of a chat about is experiential cues. Now, I connected with a wonderful, wonderful author called Joseph Pine on Twitter recently. And Joe is the co-author of one of the most commonly used customer experience books. And he co-wrote the Experience Economy. So I'm going to say it's a very detailed book. And on Twitter, when I told him that I was waiting for my copy in the mail, he said to me, do me a favor and please make sure that you read past at least up to chapter 6. And before I'd even received the book, and I said, mate, I'll do you one better. I'll read the whole book. Surely that's what books are for, to read them in full. And then when I got the book and I realized there is so much information in there, I could start to see why people weren't getting past chapter 6. But I'm adamant. There are so many amazing pieces of information and insight into the customer experience and the economy that is now being created for businesses and organizations around experience. So today I want to talk about a piece of that book, and it talks about what's called experiential cues. Now, for most of us, I'm sure we know what a cue is, as in CUE, not queue as in we're waiting in line, but that is certainly an experiential cue in itself. So what Joe talks about is creating in your business, the way you do business, a set of positive experiential cues. And there are so many improvements to the way that you can do business when you are strategically setting up positive cues for your customers. And the reality is that it doesn't end up just being for your customers, it becomes the given for your employees as well. So it really does help your employees understand where they are expected to hold themselves and deliver themselves to the customer in the customer service aspect of the entire customer experience. So, if we were to talk about a couple of examples of, what makes a cue, and a cue, if we think about it, can be unspoken, it can be visual, it could be spoken, it could be written, right? So cues could be anything from marketing and advertising to in-store signage, and so many other aspects that people can take a cue from the way that you do things. And we all know I love talking about IKEA. Sometimes I love them and sometimes they just make for great content. But the reason that they come to mind when I think about experiential cues is, their whole model of business is based upon the experience economy. So, you don't just go into an IKEA and walk up and down aisles. You literally get put on what's known as a racetrack, and you can't get out, not easily anyway, trust me, I've tried. You can't get out easily unless you move forward through the racetrack. And then what happens is the next cue that you see is their restaurants at the end of every IKEA, and it becomes somewhat of an oasis. And there's non-verbal cues as well. So even if you didn't think you were hungry, they make sure that you can smell that food about halfway through the racetrack. So you have had all that time leading to the end of what would have been your shopping experience to start to consider, actually, I could go some meatballs. Actually, I could go some drink of some description. And then even the way that they set up their restaurant, you grab a tray and you grab the food that you're interested in. So it becomes this smorgasbord for the eyes. That too is an experiential cue. They could have just said, all right, well, here's the menu, pick what you want, we'll bring it to you. But they went, actually, no, we're going to give you something that your sensory parts of your being are going to get excited about, so that you remember this cue. You remember, because it becomes an emotional connection to, the smell and the sight and, the touching of the different plates and whatnot. You get to the point where you actually are more likely to remember that experience. So then you, generally speaking, as long as everything thereafter doesn't go astray, you generally remember it as a positive experience. And then the next time someone says to you, hey, babe, let's go to IKEA, the reality is that your brain now says, actually, that didn't end up too badly. We could do that again. As opposed to, no way in God's green earth are you getting me into that racetrack, because you forget about the racetrack and you remember the other part of the experience. It's kind of like giving birth. You completely forget about the pain of labor and you remember the after you've given birth and you're like, got this beautiful baby, and you think, right, and then 12 months later you go, oh, I could do that again. You've completely forgotten about all the pain and suffering. So the experiential cue in giving childbirth is the fact that you forget all the pain and suffering, just like IKEA. You forget the racetrack and you remember the sensory experiences thereafter. Another one of my favorites is the sausage sizzle at Bunnings, right? Yes, it helps charities and it helps fundraising organizations and it does an amazing thing for the community, but it is now an experiential cue. When you smell a barbecue anywhere, it is likely that you will consider thinking about Bunnings. How hilarious is that, right? And whether it was done on purpose, it probably wasn't, but it's become such an iconic experience that, and I think we've talked about this before, really no one else can pull it off the way Bunnings pulls it off. It is now an iconic, an experiential cue that is unique to them. Anyone can do a sausage sizzle, but it's never going to be the same as a Bunnings sausage sizzle, is it? And it doesn't matter which sausage sizzle you go to in any part of the country, you still classify it as the same sensory experience, right? Unless you go to the store in Melbourne one day when I was working and they didn't tell us, but the fundraising group only provided vegan sausages until we started getting a lot of complaints. That changed the experiential cue. That became a negative experiential cue. So take that into consideration. That's not to say that you can't have them, it just means you need to set up the experience expectations as well. If we think even on a bigger, grander scale, Disneyland, right? That whole place is an experiential queue. It is insane. From the second you get off, like, so I've been to Disneyland in Hong Kong, and from the second you get, I was going to say get off the train, but the second you actually get on the train, the experience begins. In the train that takes you to Disneyland in Hong Kong, the train carriages itself are full of Disney memorabilia behind glass cases, and you can get your photo, you can take your photo with them and whatnot. And so the experience begins before you even step out into Disneyland. But then what happens is it's this grand scale of cues, from the signage, so we talk about negative cues as well. So a negative cue might be no smoking, right? Or no littering. But instead of negative cues, they have positive cues like thank you for putting your rubbish in the bin, right? Thank you for not smoking. So they're all positive spins on what would otherwise be negative cues. And then if that's not enough, like I actually couldn't deal with it very well, but you walk down a boulevard of sorts to get to the front gates from the train station to the beginning of Disneyland, and there are these speakers on both sides playing every song that's ever been created from Disney. And that's fine, but I felt like one of those really old people. I was like, the music's too loud, right? It's so loud, turn it down. But to the kids, right, who ultimately are, I was not a kid, I was a grown-ass woman. To the kids, they freaking loved it, right? They were jumping around and they're dancing and like bopping down the boulevard. And I'm like, oh God, really? Is it necessary? But then you get in, and the experience cues that happen are on such an elaborate and strategic scale that you become immersed in the experience, right? You nearly could consider yourself to feel like a Disney princess because they treat you as a guest. You are treated like a queen, right? And from their employees that don't break character, it doesn't matter, even like I've heard of people like purposefully trying to make them break character, which I think is just really horrible. Please don't do that. But they still don't break character. And that is some severe dedication to creating an immersive, cue-driven experience. And what I want is for you to consider what you do, because to be honest, even reading it myself, I was like, what do I do? What are my cues that I deliver in my own business? Because please don't think that I have all the answers. I mean, I've got plenty. Don't be upset about that. But, this is the best thing about being a consummate learner, is you get to learn from amazing researchers such as Joe and James, who are besties apparently. Isn't that so nice? To consider the way that you do business differently. And we really are working from, what used to be a commoditized way of doing business to then, we take that commodity and we'd turn it into a product. And then probably around the 1990s, 2000s, we started to really start to move into this service-based era of doing business. And now, as Joe and James explain, we're definitely like getting into the thick of service-based isn't enough. And if I think about what I do, mine is a very service-based organization, right? A lot of what I do is about service. The product that I sell is my knowledge. Is it commoditized? Not so much. Like if I went out of business tomorrow, there's not really another one of me. If there is, I mean, even my twin would be worried. But the reality is that for me to be successful and for you to be successful in the next era of business, you have to start considering how it is that you create an experience, right? And to create an experience requires it requires cues to be put in place at the right time for the right people, right? So this is the other thing, is that you can't just consider everybody the same, right? The cues that work for me are not necessarily going to be the cues that work for everybody else, right? We are certainly not cookie cutters of the one person. And that is the other predicament that we fall into in business, is that we try to mass produce the way that we do things, and ultimately it doesn't end up working that well for everybody because, well, we're not the same. We are, we talk about the human experience. We are humans. There is not one of us that is exactly the same. So why in business do we try to cut corners and pretend that you are? So from this, what I want you to think about, there is a plane going over my house and it sounds like an earthquake. I don't know why there is a plane going over my house. It's very weird. I live nowhere near an airport. But what I want you to think about through this whole process is when you are mapping out the experience that you deliver, okay, whether it's a front-end experience or a background experience, right? Your systems, your processes, your policies, your procedures, what are the cues that are helping you to deliver a better experience, right? Not a better service, not a better product, but a better experience. And we're going to be talking about more about the concepts that James and Joe discuss in this book throughout the next Upteen live broadcasts, because, this shit's gold. Thanks, guys. But the concepts that are in it need to become so much more known, and not just known, but implemented, because the reality is, like they said, we are going into an experience-based era of business. And if you can't maximize or optimize the experience, but as much as optimize it, make it customized for different people, then the likelihood is that loyalty will not come to you, right? I talk about creating a customer experience that is worthy of your customer's loyalty. Creating positive experiential cues is one of the ways to make that happen. So over the next period of time, I'm going to keep reading this book, and I'm going to also consider what are the experiential cues that I deliver. What do I put into the way I do business to create loyalty for my brand? And if you're watching live or you're watching this later on and you think, yeah, I've got some great cues, actually, this is what I do, share them. Let's learn from you. As I said, we are consummate learners, right? We never always know everything. But if you want to learn more about the different types of cues that you can implement into your business, or, at a start, if you kind of think, oh God, this feels like a big thing, at a start, walk around your business and think and observe potentially the negative cues that are in your business. So if you have, say, for example, a bricks and mortar business, and you've got, signs up that start with no, well, that's a negative cue, right? If you have, what else? If you have like one register open, but 15 people waiting on the regular, that's a negative cue. Not just a negative CUE, like that's a negative QUEUE. whatever it is. So the reality is that people are now taking those cues as the customer experience. Instead of, okay, there's 15 people waiting, but there's only one register open. You know what? All hands on deck. We're now opening 5 registers for the next 5 minutes. You know who's good at that? Aldi. Aldi is good at that. It sometimes frustrates me that they are as quickly off the register as they were on it, but they are very, very responsive as to the queue situation, starting with a queue, and how that impacts the queue of the CUE of the customer experience. So my metaphorical hat gets tipped off to Aldi. For a supermarket, because tell me the rest of the supermarkets are not as onto it as Aldi, that's for sure. But that is a positive cue, right? It could be a negative cue if they didn't get their shit together and get on a register, but they go, oh, no, bang. The team understand that their cue is to see X amount of people in a line and to get the next available person onto a register. And the next available person is anybody that works in that shop can work a register, right? So that level of cross-training is also reminiscent of positive customer experience cues. So I want you to think about how creating positive cues in the way you do business can become a thing. And strategically, and remember we talked about strategic decisions the other day, strategically you are making a choice to do business differently, right? Strategy isn't a plan per se, right? It's the choice, the decision to do an activity differently to everybody else. So what are you going to do differently? It could be written, it could be unspoken, it could be, a spoken cue. What are you going to do differently in the way that you do business to create positive experiential cues that work towards building a loyal customer experience? So while I consider what I'm going to do, and by all means, I'm open for any feedback and ideas. So, if you think, hey, I reckon if you did this, I'd be loyal. Great, tell me. I love feedback. All about it, right? I love giving it. I love getting it. So let's bring it on. And the same goes, if you want some insight into what you might be able to do, then hit me up and let's talk. But at least consider the possibilities of what some positive experiential cues can do for the experience that you deliver to your customers, and how that then helps them create a loyal following to the way you do business, to your brand, right? You become the trusted, value-driven brand. So I want you to have a think about that. That's it for me today. I will be back on, will I be Wednesday? I feel like I've got to go into a business seminar for a few days. If I'm back on Wednesday, I'll see you Wednesday. Otherwise, get out there and go and deliver value to somebody else in your life, because we all know what goes around comes around. I'm Aileen Day. Until next time.